the challenge of secularisation then. This sheet is fairly straightforward. The topic itself is quite easy to really get to grips with as well, and it does link in with a lot of different questions. So, top first box is nice and roomy. You have plenty of space with this one as well. Is Britain secular then? That is the question. So this one slide goes in the first top box. Secularisation is a theory that links the decline in religion to modernisation. And so you need to know what the word secularisation means, or secular, in case you get asked it in a question in an exam. It is the sort of word they might drop in. So it means the decline in religion to modernisation, modernisation, growing modern society. Jose Casanova, in Rethinking Secularisation, identifies 3 ways in which people talk about secularisation. So there he is. The first way, so again all this goes in the first top box. The decline of belief and practice in modern society. Some suggest this is a normal, universal, human developmental process. Maybe yes. According to the 2014 British Social Attitude Survey, more people do claim to be non-religious than Christian. So he might be correct in the first point that we are having a decline in our belief and practices in the modern society. This might be normal due to just universal human development. But then we've always been evolving. We've always been changing as a society, and religion has never really disappeared. So why now? Second of all, don't worry about about the numbers. It's more just about getting the points in your exam. The privatisation of religion, where religion should be private and should not be seen in public. Maybe no, because major national events such as Remembrance Day still involve religious organisations. Has religion become private? I don't know whether people do talk about their religiousness as much as they used to do. Some religions are obviously very, very visible still with what people wear. But certainly for Christianity, maybe seeing someone wear a cross or something like that. But then again, when someone wears a cross, you don't know whether it's just a fashion statement or a religious, they are a Christian. So is it becoming more private? But then certain events like Remembrance Day are still heavily religious. Finally, the secular separation of spheres of state, economy, science, which are free from religious institutions. Well, hang on a minute, the Queen is still head of Church of England. And the bishops of Church of England still sit in the House of Lords. So have things such as decisions about state, decisions about economy, science, are they really free from religious institutions? And so the 3 quotes there are from Jose Casanova. The bits in bold are responses to why his points might or might not work. So the bits in bold are stepping towards evaluation, but again you would have to say, using critical words, is he therefore convincing or not? But whenever someone says something like that, don't just accept what they say. Think about it. Does it actually make sense? Is religion becoming private? Is religion becoming separate from economy and science? Is it really part of just our evolutionary human process that we are evolving away from faith? Is he correct in those beliefs? That's what you have to explore and that you have to answer. Box underneath then, you have 2 separated into one big one. The 2 separations are for your top 2 bubbles. This is the challenge of secularisation. Is it really the case? Is secularisation really the case? Steve Bruce, what a good strong name. Steve Bruce, a sociologist of religion. If you do sociology and you see any overlaps and links, please bring them in your exam. Describes Christianity in Britain as a pale shadow of its former self. Paul Helas and Linda Woodhead, also sociologists of religion, identifies a growth in alternative spiritualities. So, for example, Buddhist mindfulness as Christianity declines. So both of these are recognising that it's not religion that is declining. That's what secularisation argues, that it's religion that is declining. What they're saying is it's not religion, it's Christianity. You have to make that distinction. It is not necessarily that religion is on the decline, it's that maybe that Christianity is on the decline. And as you saw in Pluralism and Society when we did that was it 2001, 2011 census, and it did show that, was it that 7 million more people associate themselves with atheism, and I think Christianity lost 3 million people or something like that. So you have got to see that, yes, Christianity might be declining as far as the statistics, but is that just because people aren't admitting it now? But religion itself is not necessarily declining, so do be very careful with that. Boxes attached underneath. In 1960s, sociologists suggested that the Western Europe would lead the way in secularisation and the rest of the world would follow. So they thought that Western Europe would lead the way, becoming secular, and then the rest of the world would try and catch up. However, the majority of the world's population still claim to adhere to a religion, and due to immigration, this has brought many new faiths to Britain. We are a very multi-faith society, as we know when we did pluralism. We are a very multi-faith society, therefore Christianity might be declining, but we are certainly not becoming secular. Therefore, Charles Taylor in Secular Age suggests that the presumption that a government will be Christian and so will the state and people within has been replaced with a plural religious situation. Please take your time with these slides, there is a lot to write.
Is it just to check? Then,
Top two,
yeah.
Bit underneath, yeah. So what Charles Taylor is saying there is very, very interesting. What he's saying is people would expect our country to be Christian because our head of state is the Queen. She is Church of England. As it said in the previous slide, some of the bishops are within the House of Lords. So we are predominantly a Church of England country. He's saying that we then assume that the country itself should therefore be Christian and the people within it should therefore be Christian. And what he's arguing is that's not the case, and that view is now being replaced with this idea that actually we are a plural religious society. Plural meaning multiple different religions. So we're not secular, but we're not necessarily Christian. Hence again why another link to pluralism and society, you can see how closely these things link together, where Prince Charles said that once he becomes king, he'll no longer be known as the defender of the faith, he'll be known as defender of faith, meaning he is no longer defending the faith of Christianity, but defending faith of everyone in the country because of that plural religious situation. This means that the number of people following Christianity may be decreasing, but the secularisation of Britain is not happening due to the many other religions that are still being followed. So mindfulness, it says with Linda Woodhead, mindfulness, for example, is very, very popular now. Companies use it as a way of helping with stress. Doctors are telling people to read up about it. Things like meditation. All of these are used in such a busy, intense social media impacting society. People now turn to things like mindfulness, and that is Buddhist tradition. It is a religious tradition that people are using, whereas Christians turn to prayer, Buddhists turn to mindfulness, and mindfulness has become very, very popular. You do not have to claim yourself as a Buddhist. You don't have to say I'm a Buddhist because I do mindfulness. But what it is it's recognising that whilst you might not claim to be a Buddhist, you might practice Buddhist beliefs. When it comes to Freud, underneath you have a very large box. That's because you have 1, 2 boxes to go into it, but they will fit comfortably. So you have 2 slides to go into the next box. So for Freud and Dawkins are the big names for this one. Nice and easy. We know our friend Freud. So, when we did it in lesson, we did have a look at this quote from Feuerbach. There's no place to write this, but it is in your notes. What yesterday was still religion is no longer such today, and what today is atheism, tomorrow will be religion. What he's saying is, where we change, we're like a roller coaster. One day we're religious, then we're atheist, then we're religious, then we're atheist. And so we change, it's fluid. We are religious fluid. We are atheism fluid, and these are things that change with society. And Feuerbach said that right back when. Don't forget, Feuerbach is the same man, however, that did say religion, society will evolve and religion will disappear. Feuerbach is the same man that we did in religious experience, so quite interesting to see the overlap there. When we did it in class, we did do a bit of research on Freud into things like wish fulfillment, delusion and being unhealthy, and how these played a part in his arguments. And so, in the box, please will you write, again don't forget there's 2 slides to go in there, but nice big writing, you can see it's not going to be a squeeze. Freud believed that religion and modern religious beliefs are a delusion that exists to protect us from nature and fate. Fate being what? What's our fate? Death, exactly. And so religion comforts us, protects us from that fear that we have of ultimate death. Freud argued that religion provides information that humans crave about things that cannot be discovered through a study of reality. So religion answers certain things that we crave. Can anybody remember which argument links in with that when we put religion in where we don't have information? God of gaps, excellent. So it's the idea of God of gaps argument, where we have a gap, we put God into it. And so that's what Freud's arguing here, that we crave information about things that cannot be discovered through study of reality, such as what happens when we die. That is something that science cannot answer, and therefore we turn to religion. And he says there, the religions of mankind must be classed as amongst the mass delusions. Great quote. Really, really good quote. Starting with something like that in your exam would really set you off on, certainly if you want to criticise or be critical of the question at hand, that's a very, very good place to start. Or you could start using that quote to then argue against it. But that is really off the fence. The religions of mankind, so he's recognising there's other religions. Don't forget, Sigmund Freud was very, very well educated. He was very aware of things like philosophies of like Plato. That's why he has his different parts. Ego, superego is very much linked in with Plato's ideas of the 3 parts of the soul: rational, spirited and appetitive. So Freud was very well educated. He knew about the Egyptians and their different religious views, etc. So religions of mankind must be classed as amongst the mass delusions. Mass delusions because it affects everybody. It's an en masse, it's majority, and it's a delusion. That's all that goes in on this slide for now, and then we'll move on to the next slide. It's just a question, so you don't need it. So it was just what we did in class. Can you think of any questions it can answer? So yeah. So within the same box, please. Freud was concerned about the psychological impact that religious framed ideas have on the mind. He saw that religion was produced by anxiety about things beyond our control. So we create a divine force to replace this sense of uncertainty with something controllable. So basically he's arguing that we can control religion, we control God. God answers these questions that we have the need to answer. But then is that so bad? Is it so bad to crave answers to things? Isn't that what helps us progress as a society, needing to find answers to things? And so what's the harm if we do turn to religion where science can't fill things in?
Why does, if science can't answer it then, why does it mean that religion...
Yeah, so why use religion, again, the God of gaps? So why, if science can't answer it, why do we then turn to religion? And that's what Freud's arguing. And that sort of jump is therefore unhealthy. Yeah. So with this idea, he is saying that the religious framed ideas, he's saying that they have a psychological impact on us. Look at the words used, things like produces anxiety. So he saw that religion, was produced by anxiety. So we have anxiety over things, we have anxiety over questions that we can't answer, and therefore religion helps and comforts us with those. And so everything about that's to do with control. We want control over things. We want control over what we learn, what we experience, our gaps. We want to be able to control them, and therefore we put God there. Religion represses human desires, particularly desires that are destructive to society, such as sexual violence, theft and murder. Is that a bad thing? Not sure where he's really going with that one, because anything that represses desires that are destructive, like sexual violence, theft and murder, because obviously religion says don't do them, treat your neighbour as you want to be treated. And so why is that? Would that necessarily be a bad thing? But he does say that religious delusion is unreliable and unhealthy. Real religion is the transformation of anxiety into laughter. That's by Alan Watts. It's a really nice quote there that counteracts what he's saying. He's saying that real religion is the transformation of anxiety. What he's saying is religion helps from that, turn that anxiety into laughter. When we did this in class and when we discussed it, these were the things that I asked you. When we have feelings of vulnerability, uncertainty, helplessness and anxiety that Freud claims is the reason people turn to religion, that then results in becoming and having an unhealthy delusion. My questions were, is religion really that bad, helping with things like anxiety, helping with things like a lack of control and vulnerability, when people then instead turn to alcohol, medication, drugs? Why is religion the one that we are turning to? Why is religion the one we're turning to instead? Is finding God really that bad? And does logic, reason and atheism comfort us more when dealing with these issues? So in your exam, the point of that is to think about, yes, religion might cause delusions. Yes, religion might not exist, but if people turn to it in order to help with their anxieties, if people turn to it in order to help with issues that they have, instead of turning to alcohol or medication, etc., is that really a bad thing? And again, you would discuss it in your answers, so you would see, is that fair? Is what Freud's arguing, is that a convincing argument or not? So, bringing in Dawkins, a very much modern day atheist. First thing I want you to write in the box is just about the atheist bus campaign. That's it. So just put a note, atheist bus campaign. You can write the quote that was on the side of the bus as well. There's probably no God. Now stop worrying, enjoy yourself. When you did it in class, you researched the girl that put this together, etc. So you can draw all that into your exam. When we did this again, if you remember, we discussed the wording of it. There's probably no God. And we found out that she couldn't put there is no God on the side of the bus. They had to put there is probably no God. But does it really still have the same impact? But of course, Dawkins wanted to come along to anything where it was God bashing. So he wanted to come along and be part of that. And so he says this. I do recommend you get the quote down or at least paraphrase the quote. Somebody else must be responsible for my well-being and somebody else must be to blame if I am hurt. Is it a similar infantilism that really lies behind the need for a God? Infantilism is childish behaviour. And so what he's saying is you always need somebody else. You need someone for your well-being. You need someone if you're hurt. And so that need turns us to God. The questions we did underneath is this a problem with humanity or a problem with religion? So the point of that is he's criticising religion as something that we put in place to help us if we're hurt or need something for our well-being. Is that really religion's fault though, that we use it? Isn't that a problem with us, that we always want to blame somebody else, that we always want to pass the buck? Why is that religion's fault, that religion fills that need? Isn't it more humanity's fault? And is it God's fault that human beings point the finger and need to blame someone or something else for things that go wrong, such as the problem of evil? That's the whole point of the problem of evil. Evil is only a problem because we're wanting someone or something else to come and help us because we don't want to do it, because of our inactivity to help others. And if God, religion didn't exist, would humanity just find someone or something else to blame? Every single thing seems to be blamed on something else. It's religion, or it might be, you know, will we find something else if religion didn't exist? Is that just the way we are programmed? Same box, please. Dawkins versus religion. Dawkins thinks life should be meaningful without reference to religion. The human need for God is infantile, childlike. So infantile, so childlike. And an adult should be able to find meaning in life from other sources than religion. Again, is it fair though? That's the point. You putting that down is not evaluation. He's evaluating something. You writing it though is just you stating his view. You then saying, however, is this fair? And discussing that, that's your evaluation. Religion is repressive. such as religious dress codes. So he talks about the burqa. He says these not only ensure female submission, but is also a metaphor for reducing our ability to perceive and understand things. So the burqa is obviously the full head covering, the niqab is just the eyes, and the hijab is the headscarf. And we watched the things not to say to someone that wears a burqa, and we watched that and looked at the different women's views on that. Please keep your eyes open on things like Twitter. Dawkins a couple of weeks ago tweeted about a really hot day. It was one of the really hot days of our summer that we got a couple of weeks back, and he said how he saw a family of Muslims and the little boy was in shorts and then the little girl was covered in head to toe in black, and he made some comment about that. You can quote that in your exam. Examiners want to see that you're up to date with social media, and they know you are, so use it to your advantage. Use what's going on at the moment, and so keep your eyes up. So if you are on Twitter, link yourself up to the Pope Francis, because anything you can talk about directly, a lot of his is in Italian though, but Pope Francis and Dawkins. So, indoctrination of children. According to Dawkins, religion is something that everyone needs to escape from. He is most concerned about how children are hijacked by religious faith, causing them harm. He uses extreme examples to illustrate his points in his book, The God Delusion, such as sexual abuse, Irish nunneries, and kidnapping and forced baptism. He argues that children before the age of consent being considered religious, e.g. to enter some schools, is a form of long-term psychological abuse. And then you have a quote there from Nicholas Humphreys. So what Nicholas Humphreys is arguing there in an Amnesty lecture in 1997, he says, in short, children have a right not to have their mind addled by nonsense, and we as a society have a duty to prevent them from it. The questions we discussed as a class were, do you think it's acceptable to bring up children as atheists? Would he class his children as atheists? Is that not just labelling children the same? Oh, my children are atheists. If his children did come to him one day, obviously his children are grown up now, but if when they were younger said, oh, Dad, I do think I want to go to church, or I do want to read about religion, how do you think Dawkins would have responded to that? Is that not just as indoctrinating his atheism as it is religion? Do you think Dawkins is accurate when he says religion is a form of psychological abuse? You have to evaluate that. He's basically saying you have mental problems if you are religious, or if you bring your children up Christian, or if you take your children to Sunday school. Just put your hand up in here if you went to Sunday school as a child. At least it's about a third of us, okay? So he's basically arguing that your parents have psychologically abused you. Put your hand up if you went to a Christian primary or Christian secondary school. Again, about a third of people. Your parents psychologically abused you. You now suffer from psychological abuse. Again, why do you think Humphreys calls religion nonsense? And again, do you think, using extreme examples, that's one thing Dawkins is so good at. He uses the most extreme examples. Of course, people know about the sexual abuse within the church, with things like some priests and vicars within Catholicism specifically. They often get very, very bad reputation and called out in the news an awful lot. And there's a lot of recent things as well, so keep your eyes open. Of course, it's going to use the Irish nunneries where they used to take babies from young mothers, or they used to abuse them within them because of their views. It's also known that there was kidnappings of babies and they were forced to grow up Christian, etc. But whenever you look at anything, you can find extreme answers. If you wanted to argue against anything, you could find extreme views to back up what you're trying to argue. Why go for extreme things? If it's correct and if it's right what he's saying, shouldn't just normal everyday examples also work to prove his point? Why do you have to use extreme things? And so, again, he's attacking religion in any way he can do. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, and you would have to discuss that in your answer, but using extreme examples, using language like from Humphreys, nonsense, hijacked by religious faith. If your point is so easy to prove, couldn't you just prove your point quite quickly? Why do you have to, like you said, Kyle, when he does the... reads out the God delusion on the audio book, why does he have to scream these points? If it's so obvious, you would just think he'd just argue it very, very coolly and calmly. Yeah. Box underneath is Christianity a major cause of personal and social problems? This is a question the examiners do ask. So this is a question that is on your must know information. And again, you can bring anything on this coverall to answer this. Christianity can be seen as having a negative influence on society. Anybody recognise a mock question in there? According to Dawkins, Christianity has played a part in the criminalisation of homosexuality and anything else that differs from the moral absolutes. He continues that it has been a negative influence on the sanctity of human life and attempts to restrict women's access to abortion and contraception. The picture of George Bush is there because obviously George Bush was a Christian from Texas, and one of the things that he made very, very difficult was contraception and things like allowing women abortion. They actually wanted to make abortion illegal in some states. When George Bush was governor of Texas, he oversaw a third of executions, the death penalty in the USA at the time, whilst preventing medical advancements in using embryonic life. So you couldn't use fetuses that are left over from things like IVF. You do it for medical advancements in order to find things like stem cell research. So you couldn't use embryonic life, yet you could still promote the death penalty. And so a lot of the laws and the rules and the ideas of specifically Texas are quite contradictory. And the reason why we focus on Texas is because obviously George Bush is from Texas. However, the difficulty of using multiple examples is when a generalisation to the whole faith is then made. Why ignore other examples? So in the 19th century, churches established schools for the poor, or civil rights activists such as Martin Luther King Jr. who had a leading role in challenging segregation.
New York.
New York. So why ignore? So this again is a bit of a dig to Dawkins. Dawkins is finding all the extreme examples of when religion or Christianity has done us wrong, but then biased much? What about all the very amazing things that Christian people, Christian thinkers, Christian institutions have done? All the amazing things that CAFOD, for example, the charity of CAFOD have been able to achieve. Or how it is, in this case, 19th century churches made schools for the poor. Martin Luther King was a leading role in his pacifism influenced by Jesus. Those that raise the sword die by the sword. They challenge segregation. They use pacifism in order to do it. All, again, from a Christian perspective. If your view is so correct, isn't it better to produce a fair argument that looks at both sides rather than just finding the most extreme things against it? Does that really present the most educated argument? Maybe critics use the most extreme examples, whilst Christianity could be seen as representing the everyday behaviours that are often overlooked, such as charity work, hospice support and food kitchens. At the end of the day, Dawkins has a big mouth. People know he's around, people can't miss but listen to him. Whereas often within Christianity, they do things every day and they just don't sing about it. They don't do a big dance about it because of the humility that they have. They don't want to make a big show and dance. When they do things like charity work, the hospices are run often as a Christian organisation, or food kitchens. And so people forget the very good things that Christianity does because they listen to the louder voices of people like Dawkins. Little box at the bottom is just for Jo Marchant. She was a science journalist, has found compelling evidence to show how religion and belief are the source of well-being. You then researched her. And so again, turn to your notes from your class notes or research her again. But she does link a lot to what William James says in Religious Experience. So I do recommend you checking that out and making those synoptic links. Once you're happy, turn over your sheets. We're going to have to just speed up slightly. So I'm just conscious of time. Box at the top then. Christianity should play no part in public life. Secularity means the absence of church or religion in government and state. This means the absence of religious involvement in the government and public matters. The church and religion should not be part of government and public matters. The separation of church and state is found in countries such as France, Turkey and the USA. The key idea is that religion should have no bearing or influence on the public world. It is not the it's not that governments are neutral in matters of religion, but any decisions that affect public matters, laws, state-funded schools, are based on democratic or democracy and non-religious foundations. Leona?
Could you use Gutierrez, is it, from Liberation Theology, who said that to be religious you need to be political as well?
Yeah, excellent. Gutierrez, I think it's Gutierrez that does say that you have to be political, so you have to have that involvement. Excellent synoptic link, Leona. Very, very good. The separation of church and state can also be seen to be bubbling under the surface in the UK. People want it to be separated. However, can you really separate the church and state when the state is the Queen and she's the head of the Church of England, and that has been throughout our history that the monarchy has been a leading role in one of the main denominations. Obviously, it's been Church of England since Henry VIII. What you've got to think about when you discuss these things in your exam is, first of all, you know, should we have a separate church and state? Should it be that religion should have no impact? But then again, does that mean that if somebody is on the board making these decisions and they are religious, does that mean that they're no longer out? Or does it just talk about people like the bishops in the House of Lords who are there because they are bishops and therefore can't make the decisions? So where's the grade, not the grade boundaries, but where's the boundaries there between taking out religion from making laws? How do you take religion out of it if religion is part of the people making the laws? And then religion still has to work within the laws. Religion doesn't have their own laws completely. So the laws impact religion, so shouldn't religion impact the laws as well? Why do they have to be separated? And does religion really have such a bad influence on the decisions that are made? So, for example, as Lewis has just said now about the ideas of agape, or this idea of do not murder, etc., a lot of our laws are traditionally from a lot of Christian teachings, or a lot of Old Testament teachings anyway, Jewish teachings. So is it really necessary to separate them? And again, you have to discuss this in your answer. Skinny box underneath is for those two cases, the two legal cases. And so one in one box, one in the other. You need to go back and look at your notes on these. So Lee versus MacArthur and Wider versus the UK. Apologies on pronunciation there. Box underneath is split into two. You've got one for the blue, one for the underneath. So blue box on the one side, the bit underneath for the second side. The British Humanist Association campaigns against schools with religious character. This is education and religion, saying we aim for a secular state guaranteeing human rights with no privilege or discrimination on grounds of religion or belief. But then with that, it's saying you shouldn't have privilege or discrimination because you can't go to religious school because you're religious. But then it's fine to say for public schools, you can't come to our school because you can't afford it. So again, privilege on the grounds for paying for education is okay, but privilege because you're a Catholic and you're not a Catholic, therefore you'll only accept a Catholic at your Catholic school, that isn't all right. And so again, it's finding ways to criticise religion when, isn't this just part of society? Isn't this just what we do as society? And at the end of the day, is a religious school, do they really discriminate that much? Would you class it as discrimination? It's very strong language. We aim for a secular state guaranteeing human rights. I wouldn't necessarily say Christian schools take away human rights. Any less than a public school saying you can't afford to come here. Well, that's a human right of I want an education, but I can't afford £5,000 a term or 10 grand a term, whatever it is. And so think about the bigger picture, because it's very easy to see what they're saying. It's very easy to see where they're going and just think, let's bash religion. But think about it in the grander scheme of things. The humanists, instead, they argue young people of all different backgrounds and beliefs can learn with and from each other. And Dawkins, of course, jumps on this bandwagon. He goes to the British Humanist Association to add his own points. Dawkins adds that religious schools replace evidence-based approaches to understanding our world with superstitions. He argued that teaching evolution alongside other theories such as creationism in science classes fails to credit the evidence of evolution. And I remember when we did this together, I asked you how many of you learned evolution and creationism together in science classes, and not one of you said you did. You learn creationism in religion, you don't learn creationism in science. I don't know what schools he goes to, where
everywhere in America do that.
Oh, is it everywhere in America? But then America doesn't teach religious studies at all, so that maybe is why. Yeah. But yeah, so he's arguing there, and he's not being specific in where it is then, and so he's making out that everywhere does it, and that isn't the case, because obviously creationism, not all Christians are creationists. Creationism is a very small part of people's beliefs. Boxes underneath then are for two views. We're going to go into the defending the arguments now. Defending religious schools. So are children from separate schools less open-minded as some might wish to claim? If you go to religious school, oh, you're not as open-minded. Professor Leslie Francis in the first box, he's a researcher at Warwick University for Religions and Education Unit. He found evidence to suggest that young people who are committed to Christianity are actually more open to people of other faiths and beliefs, not less. This is because it is not the school that impacts attitudes, but the students themselves. Again, are we using it as an excuse? You have a narrow-minded student, oh, that's because you've gone to religious school. Are we not using that as an excuse? Is it not just the students themselves, not of where they were educated, which is the point he's making? Charles Taylor says that there should be a recognition that societies are increasingly multicultural. No culture, including an atheist one, should impose itself on others because this causes minority cultures to diminish. So basically, everybody should have their own faiths, because otherwise, if everyone was just atheist, then it's boring. You get rid of the minority cultures. And again, you need to discuss this in your exam, does Dawkins impose his atheism like he argues that Christianity imposes its Christianity? Box underneath is for further views. Christopher Dawson's essay, The Challenge of Secularism, argues that secular education is problematic. Dawson points out that where education systems were consciously anti-religious, meaning deliberately avoiding religion, such as communist countries, religion has become endangered. Removing religion from culture, art, agriculture, music not only deprives religion but also deprives people who are trying to make sense of their own culture. So he looks at states and systems where religion has been removed, and it doesn't always result in the best community and society. Finally, Professor James Conroy argues that religious schools have an important role in liberal democratic states. They provide parents with a choice and prove counterbalance to any single driving influence on education. So that idea of a counterbalance is a nice idea. You do not need to remember all four of these. It is about picking one and doing something with them. It is about engaging with them, evaluating them, etc. Box underneath is going to be about the government and religion, and then spiritual values, and finishing off with the secularisation theory. So, with government and religion, the box underneath, we discussed 3 questions, so the bit you need to write down is the bullet points there. The questions we discussed was, should government make laws that impact religion, such as laws to remove religion from public space? We also looked at recent examples of where laws have impacted upon religion, and we looked at how they were trying to ban the burqa. So this was where we brought in that, and how in France, I think a woman was asked to leave the beach because she was covered from head to toe in quite flowery, colourful colours. It wasn't, she wasn't wearing all black, for example, so she was wearing quite holiday colours, but they still asked to remove her from the beach, and it caused quite a lot of commotion. And so is it fair that government make laws about religion when religion has no impact upon our laws at all, such as should it be allowed to ban the burqa? This is something you can discuss in your exam. Some argue that government should be entirely separate, as the Church of England state ignores the many other faiths and beliefs in Britain. However, other faiths are not excluded. That should be from that House of Laws, not from the House of Laws, e.g. Chief Rabbi for Jews and the Duke of Norfolk for Catholics. So they do accept and look at having people from many different faiths within the House of Lords. And again, what about doctors who do not want to carry out procedures because of religious beliefs? Does that mean they can no longer be doctors? And do we really have enough doctors in our country to make such decisions? So if we are going to punish people for being religious in a sense, does that mean it goes to people like doctors, and that could then impact significantly on society? Because being religious does not make you a better or a worse doctor, but it might mean that some procedures you are not comfortable doing. But therefore, should the government get involved within that? Box underneath. Are spiritual values just human values? So we again looked at that question, can you think of any Christian teachings that are just essential human values? So for example, things like compassion, forgiveness, justice, they're not just Christian teachings, they're human teachings. You teach your children to be compassionate, you teach your children to forgive. And so these aren't just Christian teachings, they're human teachings. However, not all Christian values are so easily explained, such as self-sacrifice. Bonhoeffer, for example, he talks about discipleship and sacrifice. They are not as easy to promote to everybody. So a mother for her child or a soldier for his platoon, no, they would sacrifice themselves. Unconditional love, doctors and nurses who aid those in disease-stricken countries, they give their life unconditional to help people. So there are still Christian values within society, even if they're harder to see. Perhaps, therefore, spiritual values, pure, perfect and untainted values, are better than human values, physical, sensual and morally corrupt. So what that's arguing is maybe religious values are better than human values, because human values can be easily corrupted. God represents both spiritual and human. That again should say values, not valves. I'll have to go through and update them. Brilliant. Last slide. Secularisation theory, you need to know about this. That bullet point goes in the long thin part, and then you have the 3 views which go in the 3 boxes. Secularisation theory, this is the belief that religious belief would progressively decline as democracy and technology advance. So this group of people believed that as society evolved, as democracy and technology advanced, religious belief would decline. Has it happened? Luke Bretherton Brotherton, in an interfaith lecture in 2009, talks about the reality of multicultural, multi-faith London in full bloom. He talks about how walking down the street in London and you see so many multi-faiths, multicultures, multi-religious views. And so he's saying there in an interfaith lecture, yeah, not so secular. Peter Berger, who contributed to the secularisation theory, so he's one that actually talked about the theory in the first place, again you'll probably study this in sociology, has since retracted his earlier conclusion, saying secularisation on societal level is not necessarily linked to secularisation on the level of individual consciousness. What he means by that is individuals might be becoming more secular, but it still doesn't change society. Finally, David Ford and Jose Casanova, from your first slide, are both quite critical of the idea that secular atheism is unquestionably good. They state that atheist ideologies such as fascism, communism and capitalism, what a nice group that Dawkins belongs to there, have sought to write out religion from civilization. And so what he's arguing, and I think probably that's the best point on the whole lot, we are promoting atheism as just unquestionably good. What Dawkins says is just unquestionably good. Is it really though? Is atheism really that good? Thank you very much, everybody. Well done.